Hey, good morning. Today we're going to be installing a set of Silver's NEOMAX Coilovers on the Tesla Model 3 Performance you see behind me. Hopefully get a little bit better ride height, some adjustability, and then improve kind of performance when we're doing for some occasional track days. So looking forward to getting this done. I have not been able to find an install video for the Silver's NEOMAX, so hopefully this is helpful. If you're looking for them, stick around and we'll get right to it. Thanks. Hey, like I said, today we're going to be installing the Silver's NEOMAX coilover system. That's a one-way adjustable set of dampers. So front and rear, you can adjust how firm or soft it is. And you'll see it have a swift spring upgrade also on them. So we're going to go through and install them. Reason I picked them, a couple reasons. You'll see at the top, they have the camber adjustment plates, and then the rear setup. Like on this side, this is the rears, this is the front, and then these are the two springs that are gonna go. So the height adjustments here and here, and then there and there. And so the idea with these is they come complete. So I'm not messing with a spring compressor in order to swap out the tops of each of these and retain that OEM stuff. So this is all new setup, just plug and play, straight up replace. The reason I went with the Silver's NEOMAX, it's an established company. And I don't think I'm paying a Tesla tax on it because they make suspension systems. They've been doing it for about 20 years or so, so they're established, but they also just kind of branched into the Tesla space. So get them for less than half of what you can get the Unplugged Performance or the Mountain Patch Performance coilovers. And well, I'll be able to go through install, I'll tell you how easy the install is, and then get some driving impressions before and after I get it aligned. So hopefully it turns out great. Anyway, stick around and we'll get right into it. Thanks. So the thing we're trying to take care of, we're gonna reduce that enormous wheel gap on the rear and on the front. Please excuse the curb rash. So we're gonna reduce that a little bit and hopefully make the vehicle ride just a little bit nicer. So it'll overall lower it. I think it improve the look, and then we're gonna take this for some autocross in addition to the drag racing, and hopefully we'll be able to perform a little bit better. First step, we're gonna remove the Frunk interior, all this plastic stuff that you see in here. So first step is we're gonna pull off this top part. You just pull up kind of firmly and it detaches, and that's your access to your things like brake fluid, your battery, things of that nature. So I'm gonna put this off to the side. All right, next step is you pull up firmly on this, and it's some 3 little plastic brackets in there. So we pull that up and it's out. And then last bit, we have 7 10mm bolts. So I got my little electric impact wrench. This is 1, 2, 3. You can just toss these right in here. It's all good. That one. 4, 5, and then we pull up this one to get the last 2. So we pull up on that, and it pops off. And you got 6, 7. All right. So with that, we set this aside, and we pull up. You'll feel it detached from a few different spots. I'm going to thread this part through so I don't have to disconnect it. And that's removing the frunk. That's it. All right, so for this next spot, key thing is we got to get these 3 nuts off in order to be able to remove the strut tower from the top. So I'm not gonna remove them yet. I'm gonna wait till it's lifted up in the air. But I just want to show one quick thing. So first of all, these, you'll see a lot of YouTube videos where people are like, oh, I just put it on a lathe and I thinned the walls on a 13mm socket. So they're 13mm nuts. That's right. You can order this off of Amazon. So it's a nut driver set. Make sure it has the 13mm, but you can find that online. And this fits perfectly in that hole. And as you can see, you can actually remove the stuff from there without. So if you don't do that, the other thing is you have to pull off this bolt, this one, and then you got to pull this up, and there's a a fourth bolt in there. So this avoids us having to remove the entire top assembly. So it saves a bunch of time, makes it a little bit easier when you're going to that next step. So I'll put the link in the description for it. But this little set, making sure you get that 13 millimeter, is going to save a whole lot of time. All right, so I pulled the car deep into my really filled up garage. Next step is we're going to get it up in the air. So you see, use these Reinstallation and that little floor jack, and that'll help me get it up. Use this, got this little knob right here, and that helps it so that when there's only those 4 contact points you're supposed to pick up the Tesla from. So this fits into that little circular contact point underneath there, and so it's located right here, and it allows you to pick up the vehicle and then put it on jack stands pretty easily. So I'm gonna get that started. All right, so vehicle's up on jack stands. You see those Ren stands kind of set up under each corner. So one thing to be careful of, you'll see, let's see if I can pick it up real quick. You'll see where it connects into the little holes underneath. So you gotta be worried is when you're lifting up the front right, the back left over there. So in my case, the passenger side rear, it actually came out of the hole just because the chassis of the car is so stiff because of the battery pack. So what you saw me doing is running back over there in order to make sure it got kind of set up right. But right as at this point, ready to take off the wheels. So first thing is to take off these wheel caps. So if you don't want to use a screwdriver and scratch it, you don't want to destroy anything. You see that little hole? So you get this little tool off of Amazon. It's real easy. And then just kind of fits right in there. It's like $4 or something stupid. And you just yank it off. So super easy. All right, so I got the wheel caps off. Next is to pull off the wheels. All right, so for this next section, you see we got the front wheel off. We're gonna do the fronts first. And so we're worried about disconnecting this bolt right up here. Well, that one right there. We're gonna be disconnecting this from the sway bar right here. We're gonna be pulling this cable off and disconnecting this and bolting that right down there. So that's and then we'll open the frunk and then disconnect the shock tower. And then with that, I'm gonna pull this whole assembly out. All right, so the first thing I did, put the vehicle, the front suspension under some tension in order for me to be able to disconnect this bolt right up here for the sway bar. All right, just pulled off the sway bar right here. So I was able to use the breaker bar in order to break it loose. I mean, I could get an impact in on it right afterwards and it came right off. So next is just pulling out these little clips without hopefully breaking them. So if you use this little trim removal tool and get in there, you can just pull them right out, okay? So the next step, I'm gonna remove this pinch bolt up here. So this is a Torx T50. It's gonna be on this side I'm gonna hold, and then a 15mm bolt on this side. So I'm gonna get this in here in order to secure it. And I'm gonna lock it on this side. All right. And next step is I'm gonna push these together. All right, so for this next section, we're gonna disconnect this bolt from the lower control arm. And so you'll see I already have the wrench on it. And what I'm gonna do, basically get some tension on it, break it loose, and then I'll use the impact hopefully for the rest of it. All right, so for this next section, I'm going to use the specialty tool that we talked about earlier. Drop it in there. So let me grab a magnet real quick. I don't want to lose that. All right, this last one. And it just fell. I'll get that in a second. So you'll see, shock fell down. Now I'm gonna pull it out. All right, so when it dropped, see this one right here, it locked onto that. So I'm gonna disconnect that one right now. So would have been better, obviously, to do that before I dropped it. All right, so disconnected the strut from the top. I actually had to pull this little 13 millimeter bolt off of the brake line just to give me a little extra play. And I'm gonna pull down on this. I'm gonna push up here. All in this effort to get my strut tower out. It's probably easier with an assistant, but who needs that? All right, that's the strut. Oh man, don't mess up your paint on the way up. All right, check back in a second. All right, so I got both front struts out, whole front assemblies out. I'm gonna now take the opportunity to, as a initial setup, basically just adjust them so that the height of the coilovers is about an inch or so shorter than the stock ones. So I'm gonna eyeball that. It's not gonna be perfect, but it'll be probably close where I can adjust off of it. One thing to note, these are left and right, so you just need to make sure you get the right one. So you line them up, make sure that this tab is in the same place where the flat one is. Okay? All right. All right, so when I measured the stock suspension from that flat portion all the way up to the top of the hat, it measured 25 3/4. So I dropped an inch off that just to kind of start, because that's really all the lowering I'm looking for. I'm not going to slam it. And so this is right now, I adjusted it to 24 3/4 inches. So you'll see that. So what I did is, in order to unscrew it, you basically unscrew this portion, you loosen that up, and then if you twist this, kind of loosen it, it'll get taller, and if you tighten it down, it'll get shorter. So one thing you do need to look at is you'll see the orientation on the top of this hat. These two are a lot closer than this one is, and than this stud is. You need to just make sure that you match the orientation of the stock suspension system, so for when you put it in, because basically there's only one way to put it in. So once you put it in, those section will be in there, and you just need to make sure that it's that will allow your sway bar to connect here. All right, once it's in the place that you want, we're going to tighten it right back up, and you're going to use one of these wrenches in order to make sure it stays in place. And that's it. One more note on this. You'll see these are the updated or upgraded Swift springs. If you don't have the Swift springs, if you have come with the stock springs, this is how you're going to adjust the preload. So I'm not going to mess with it because you're not supposed to from the factory if you have these. But if you do have the stock springs, you need to you'll adjust this until it's tight, and then about 2 more turns past that, so you'll get to 2 or 3 millimeters of preload, and that's what you're supposed to go with. All right. All right, I got an update and a slight change of plans. So, I was practicing on the passenger side before recording, and I got the shock tower in and everything. However, then the tool I was using in order to, the 13 millimeter super thin wall socket fell off and it collapsed in someplace inside the car. So I've been digging after it for like an hour or so. Have not found it. Awesome. So anyway, we're gonna now learn how to do it with taking off the 4 bolts. So stay tuned. Hey guys, so life got in the way today a little bit. So we are gonna finish this off tomorrow. All right, good morning. New day, and we're getting right back into it. So I'm gonna start off with reassembling the front side. So I'll replicate pulling off the hat and just to show you all that stuff. Talked about before, they're gonna have 4 bolts, so 1, 2, 3 back here, just a little bit difficult to get to, and then the 4th one is underneath here, right there. So you should be able to kind of barely see it. So we're gonna have to pull off of this little plastic cover, and we're gonna peel that back a little bit, and we'll go from there. So these 2 are 13 millimeter, and then these 2 are 15 millimeter, because I don't know why. So I'm gonna get right into it. So first, pulling these off, what you're gonna wanna do, kind of clear out any gunk or anything else in there. And then you're gonna basically use a little screwdriver to pop this up. Same deal with this one. And from there, just make sure they're loose. Make sure you don't lose them because it's a bad day. And this comes right up. See, that's what happens when you lose them. So sometimes it's better to pull it all the way out. I'm gonna set that aside. And then the only other one we're gonna need to get is this one right here. Okay, set this aside real quick. And we'll use the same screwdriver method on this. So this is another valuable tool right here. It's an interior trim piece tool. So if you have a Tesla loves these little things. So that's the best way to do it. All right, so I've cleared everything out off the top. But before I release all those bolts, there's one more thing I'm gonna have to pull. This ABS sensor. So it's connected in 2 places to this little shackle. So we already pulled out one just to make it loose enough to be able to operate in here. But if we're removing this whole assembly, we're gonna have to pull off this other one. So that's relatively easy. Just take some finagling. Again, use this little trim piece tool. All right, so we're back on the top. So you got the ratchet on that bolt right there. So I basically just have to pick this up. This is real easy. You're not gonna break anything by just kind of moving it a little bit. So we start there, and then we, somewhat difficultly, pull this one off. It's a lot harder with one hand than I thought. All right, and I gotta swap over to 13 for the other 2 bolts. All right, so as we get to the last bolt, you see you've already removed the 2 15s, and then this 13 back here. You can see, so this is the last one. So as I remove that, I'm also gonna hold up this section right here. Since I don't have my assistant today, you're gonna have to believe that I did that. All right, so this is what the assembly looks like when you pull it out. Too easy. Now we're gonna get it attached to the shock. All right, so here's the top of the shock. I'm just gonna basically place this on top of it, oriented in the same way it's gonna be set up inside the vehicle. So you got our flat piece there that's facing forward. It should look like this, oriented nicely. And now we just take those 13 millimeter nuts that are supplied by the kit, and we throw them on. Torque spec for these is going to be 17 foot-pounds. So you're not putting a whole lot of effort on this, and don't just ram it down with the with an impact or anything like that, even an electric one. Okay. One additional note that I do want to point out. So two things. One, pulling this section, this assembly off, not that big a deal, first of all. And then second of all, you'll see how much stud is left on these. So likely the little solution, the cheap solution I had from Amazon, is not going to work for this anyway. So recommendation is to get either just pull the whole assembly out if you don't want to spend money to buy some specially shaved down 13mm deep socket. So I think Redwood Industries has one for like 50 bucks. So don't do that. This is not that big a deal. All right. So once again, we got these on here. We're just working them down with this small torque wrench. And going from there. Again, 17 foot-pounds is what you're looking for. There we go. So for this next section, we're going to take the full assembly and we're going to stuff it up into here. And then you're going to get it started with one of those bolts that we took out originally. So just through the top. Highly recommend you have an assistant for this part. So I'm going to see if I can get it started. All right, so slight change of plans. You'll see jamming this into here to get it over that. Very difficult with the hat on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull off these three. I'm going to disconnect it again from the hat or from the top of the strut tower. And I will reassemble basically through this access window just to be able to get all the components in there. So I think that's really what everybody struggles with when trying to put the full assembly in there. So I'll check back in a second. All right, and that was successful. So you see screws are off, but I was able to get it over that drive shaft and in the right location. So now I'm gonna go through the top. You see how you have access to the bolts from up here. You just tighten them from there. All right, so with the assembly put back together, everything in place, make sure you get an assistant and reconnect back up into its location. All right, so with all of the bolts started from below, or started when you put the assembly in place. I remember this is a 13mm, 13mm, a 15mm, and then this one's a 15mm. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna torque them back down. Torque specs for the two 15mm up here are gonna be 46 foot-pounds, and then for the two 13mm are gonna be 26 foot-pounds. All right, once you've torqued each of those bolts, just time to reassemble that plastic section on the top. And you are done up in the frunk area, actually. So this goes in place. That'll kick through, and that'll go through. And so up here is going to be where you're going to be able to adjust, and on the other side is where you're going to be able to adjust how hard and or stiff or soft the suspension is. So what I did, what you'll do is you'll turn it all the way to one side. So I'm going to turn it all the way to soft because I'm looking for a decent ride for right now. And I'm going to come back. So there's 24 total parts of adjustment. So you go to all the way to one side or the other, and then I'm going to go back 8. So you'll be able to feel the clicks. Okay. 2 and 8. All right, so at this point, we're gonna go through and we're gonna start putting hardware back in place. So we're gonna start off with this lower pin. So we're gonna put it through. We're not gonna tighten it up. You need to torque that when you're at ride height. Otherwise, you can start wear out those. You see those bushings that are around there? You'll wear those out excessively. After that, we're gonna put the sway bar connect back in, and then we're gonna finally connect this pinch bolt. So one note, when you're connecting the sway bar, you're not as strong as the sway bar is. So when you're moving it around, in order to get it in there, you're probably not gonna be able to force it. So you can use a floor jack either to adjust the suspension here, adjust the height of that, or you can press up on the sway bar itself. and that will help help you be able to fit this in. So you see, I just give it a little press, and it adjusts where the suspension is until I get to the point where I can just slide the sway bar in. Hey, one important note about all the bolts that you're putting back in, make sure you're pushing them from the front to the back, so any nut that should be going on towards the back. That way, if it loosens up, this doesn't just automatically come out. So that's just a general safety thing. Probably a once in a million thing, but you know, why take a chance? All right, so once you get all the bolts and stuff in there, make sure you reattach the brake line. So there's no torque spec or anything for that, just don't break it. For this top one, it's gonna be 41 foot-pounds. For the end length for the sway bar, you're gonna be looking at 73 foot-pounds. And then for this bottom section that you need to only torque when it's under load, up at ride height. So either you drop the car down and it's fully on the way to the tires, and then you torque it, or you use the floor jack to pick up the suspension until it gets to ride height. You can tell because the vehicle starts to, you'll start to pick it up from that front jack. So obviously don't pick it up from the front jack, but as soon as you feel it start to go, that's when you do it. And that one's gonna be 78 foot-pounds. And then obviously don't forget to reattach your ABS wire. So each of these little connections up here. All right, once you finish buttoning up everything on the inside, and everything's in place, just throw the wheel back on, hand tight with the lugs, maybe a little bit more, just to keep it in place, and we will torque it when we're back on the ground. Now it's time to move to the back. All right, first thing we're gonna do in the rear, so we're gonna remove these 10mm bolts in order to get access to the inside of the vehicle, or to the spring purchase. All right, so we're here in the back. We already pulled that the small plastic cover off the bottom, and so there's two main components we're going to take out. First is strut, and then you'll see the spring that's in here. Okay, and it should come out on video. So up at the top, you have two 15mm bolts for the top of the shock housing, and at the bottom, you're going to have two 21mm bolts. So these are very similar to the ones that were in the front. And so those are all the bolts we're going to need to disconnect. You don't need to worry about disconnecting anything else in here. So two things to note. First of all, we're going to have to pull the shock housing out first, and then we're going to support the spring perch with the jack, and that's going to make it so that when we disconnect the second bolt, so we're going to do this bolt first, and we're going to disconnect the second bolt. If we don't have it supported by the jack, all that tension that the spring is under is just going to shoot it forward down, and it's going to bounce all over the place like a cartoon, and somebody's going to get hurt. So we don't want to do that. So this bolt first. So you see with this setup, I got the breaker bar set up on this one just to break it free, and then just a regular 21mm box wrench on this side in order to hold on to that section. I'm just going to work them against each other, and then I'll use the impact to take it the rest of the way off. All right, so I pulled that bolt out. It's under a little bit of tension. It's just being pulled up. So we're going to disconnect these two next. And what that's going to do is free up the shock, and we'll pull the shock out. All right, so these clips will stay retained when they're in there, but now that it's free, we'll be able to pull out that bottom bolt. Oh man, I totally covered that up on my hand. Yeah, so the bottom bolt came out real easy once the top was free, and it just fell right down. All right, so for this next part, you see the jack, I have it up here supporting a little bit of the weight of the spring perch. So just have it in contact with a little bit of pressure, and that's it. You want to make sure it's on this black part holding the spring perch and not caught up on any part of this gray section right here with that lower control arm. So what we're going to do is we're going to disconnect this bolt next. And if you're on that lower control arm, then you're not actually holding the spring tension that's on that spring perch, and that makes it still dangerous. All right, so you want definitely a little bit of tension on the spring perch in order to be able to remove that bolt. So as you can see, I have it on there. The bolts are disconnected, so now I'm going to start to slowly let this out. So you'll see the There you go. And that way it just kind of goes down. Spring is depressed now, no longer has any energy. At this point, it's just a matter of pressing down on the spring perch. Suggest if you don't have an assistant, you basically just push that down with your feet in order to get it off the top section. I'm not sure if you can see that well, and then we go from there. All right, so once we pull the spring out, what we're gonna look at next, so you need to take this top, this is the top of the spring, you're gonna take this isolator out, and we're gonna place it inside the Silver's coilovers. You don't need to worry about the bottom one. When we place this in, you see these grooves along the bottom, those will fit right into, there's a little ring at the bottom of the spring perch. And so it'll fit right into there. All right, so before we get started, this bottom portion of the spring that we're gonna be putting back in from the coilover kit, this is actually how you do your height adjustment. So once it's in the system, you use the wrench, or once it's inside, you use the wrench to twist this. And basically, if you loosen it, it goes up. If you tighten it, it goes down. So once you have it in the place that you want, you see this little Allen key, or Allen screw right here. You'll tighten that up, lock that in, and that'll make it so that it's no longer able to move freely. So it's very important to do that once you get the height that you desired. So what I'm gonna do, just kind of guessing a good height, I'm gonna set these both to 25 millimeters. So it's just about 1 inch above on both sides. So at least they're even, and I'll be able to adjust from there. So we'll be able to see kind of where these adjustments go from. And then based off of that, hopefully by the end of the video, I'll be able to give you a good recommendation for the good starts. Remember, my target's about 1 inch drop in both the front and the rear. All right, so when you're complete, this is what your strut assembly or your spring assembly is gonna look like. See at the bottom, I've already preloaded it to 24.7 millimeters for both of them. And then here's the top with that noise isolator on top. So we're gonna put it in, and then we're gonna get to the shock. So once you have the assembly in place, just make sure that this is, the little ridges on the bottom are caught, and so when you tighten it up, they're gonna stay in place. And then this is solid on there. And then what we're gonna do is just everything else in reverse. We're gonna use the floor jack to jack up the spring perch and get it set so we can put in the shock. So as you're jacking this up, again, just make sure that the jack is only on the spring perch. And then this is like little rubber bushings. Just make sure that you're not tearing those as you're going up. You just need to fiddle it, make sure it falls in there so it goes smoothly. And what you'll do is just use the jack on the spring perch until that hole starts to line up. You'll see it as I'm jacking it up. And then run the bolt. All right, so once you get that bolt in, it should go in fairly smooth. You just kind of jiggle it around a little bit. Once you get that bolt in, we're gonna now prep the shock for installation. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna set what our damping is gonna be. So the way you do it is you use this portion at the top, this little dial. And so you'll see the thing says soft and hard upside down for some reason. Probably because they use this in a bunch of applications. So I've already clicked it all the way over to soft, and I'm not gonna be exactly the same settings as the front. So I'm gonna put this right at the halfway mark. So 24 overall sets of adjustment. So I'm gonna put it, I've already moved it all the way to soft. So I'm gonna move it counterclockwise, 12 clicks. It's 11 and 12. And so it's really easy to move. So don't think that there'll be any issue with doing it, and you'll be able to touch it right up there. So with that, get to the next step. So before you install the silver shock, make sure you take these bolts off of the OEM shock, and specifically these retaining clips. You just pull them basically, and then you help kind of just work them down there. There's little plastic clips. So you got to pull both of those things off, and then put them on that silver shock in order to retain that same anti-loss feature. Okay. All right. So I adjusted the shock to a pretty low level. Made sure I have the retention clips on there, kind of run those out as much as possible. And then I ran this bolt through just super loose in order to help kind of seat this. Just be careful of the bushings at the bottom. It's a 2-piece bushing as opposed to the one, and so once you clip the little twisty tie that they have holding it together, it will fall apart if you are not careful. So once you get that, just place that in there, run the bolt through, and then that'll hold this in one place so you're not messing around with a bunch of things. And then you just kind of seat this up here, and we start putting the bolts in. Okay. All right, so you see that I got those started. Before we get into anything else, I just want to cover real quick. So the torque spec on these are each going to be 30 foot-pounds, and then the two on the back, the 21 millimeters, are both going to be 84 foot-pounds. And so, like I said, the bottom ones we're going to do at ride height, but as soon as you install these, you can place those. And then the next step is going to be probably the most complicated. We're going to take care of doing the preload for the springs, which you do need to do on the rear, but you don't. That's not a step that you need to take on the front. So with that, let's see where we're at. All right, so for the next stage, we're going to adjust the preload of the springs. And so the way we're going to do that is we're going to lengthen. Well, we've already set the ride height that we're going to use for right now on the spring. So what we're going to do is adjust the shock so it's about 2 millimeters shorter than the point at which the spring first becomes kind of in contact with both but under no pressure. So that sounds a little bit complicated, but I'm going to show what that means. So you're tracking, in order to adjust the height of the shock once it's in place and bolted in, you're basically going to twist this cylinder. So we're going to twist it counterclockwise to lengthen it, and then clockwise in order to shorten it. All right, so with that, I'm going to release a little bit of tension on the spring, and we're going to get to the point where we can get the right preload. All right, so I followed the instructions I got from the company and basically lengthened this, slowly released the spring perch all the way down. This is still tight, still locked in there. However, as you can see at this point, I'm no longer supporting it with anything, so there's no tension on it. And so this is as far as the suspension can move. There's still a little bit of preload on the spring, even at this situation. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tighten this up a little bit so that at full perch, the shock is not under any stress. It's not gonna yank out of either of its mounts. And I'm gonna tighten it in here and go with that. So once you get it set to where you want, you push that ring all the way down there, and just remember it kind of spins opposite what you'd expect. And then once it's there, you tighten that down so that it no longer moves. All right, and that completes the assembly on this side, aside from the torquing everything down. All right, the last step here is you're gonna basically hook that over those two bolts, that covering, and you're gonna put your 10 millimeter bolt back into there. And then we'll get to putting on the tires. Hey everybody, it's been a couple days. I wanted to give a quick update. I'm bringing it in for alignment tomorrow, so I'll be able to give you the rest of the details then. But check this out. So I think the car ended up really good. Let me get away a little bit. So definitely like the look. It's even 3 inches around. You'll remember during my trials, I had to take it apart a couple different times. The end result is you're going to end up pulling it apart, especially the rear, a few different times and adjust until you get it right. I think I ended up about 18 or so millimeters on both sides between the collar and the lip, and then in the front between the where that collar, the two collars, right around 58 millimeters. So try those settings to get you started, and it's about a 1 inch to 1 1/4 inch drop all around. All right. Hey, good morning. I am about a week and a half out from that initial install with the Silvers coilovers. Could not be happier. So two things really make the experience good. First of all, Silvers customer support. Anytime I had an issue, I'd reach out through their customer service via email and get a note back maybe 12 hours later. Very helpful, very personable, and definitely looking to make sure the experience was good. Second thing, performance and ride quality. So you tinker with the ride height a little bit, it's gonna happen. I think I settled on like right around 65 or 68 millimeters between the collars in the front, and I think about mid-30s, like 35, 36 between the base and the collar in the rear. But once you tinker with the ride height a little bit, I ended up with about an inch drop and running about half stiffness in both front and rear, and I could not be happier with the results. So it definitely feels as good as stock, if not a little bit better. Definitely a little bit more controlled, and then at the track it performed incredibly. So very happy with the overall result. Hope this video helps, and definitely if you got any questions or anything like that, feel free to reach out in the comments or whatever, and I'll help as much as I can if Silvers isn't getting back to you immediately. But definitely do not worry about them not being able to support the product. So anyway, appreciate it. This has been an awesome little video install, big project for me, and hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you like and do the whole subscribe thing so I can become YouTube famous. Talk to you soon.